Hello, everybody. Welcome to our show, I was about to say. It feels like that. So I'm really pleased. It's dry, it's hot, and we're talking about nature. So, what else do we need? This is going to be a session on insurance, nature, unlocking climate adaptation, finance. Anything else you want to throw in? It's quite, we have an hour. It's quite a lot. And we're actually starting with something that's really important, the community lens. So we are very privileged to have two representatives from two cities here to kick us off and to give us their side of the story. Because a lot of what we're going to discuss later plays out at the community level. That's where we see the climate impacts, that's where we see the finance challenges, and that's where we see the co-benefits that nature-based solutions can have. So I'm very pleased to kick us off with our first guest, Naila. She's going to give you a full introduction because I'm sure I would mess up all her job titles, but I'm really pleased. Over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Naila Oliver. I am the Senior Sustainability Director for the City of Savannah, a historic coastal town on the southeast Georgia, United States. Unfortunately, our mayor, Van R. Johnson II, was not able to make it today just due to travel delays and cancellations. However, I am here representing him and U.S. cities in general. So I am also here representing important organizations such as the National League of Cities, where Mayor Johnson serves as the second vice president, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and ICLEI, as City of Savannah is a member. And then finally, I'm also here as a messenger of America is All In. So last week, mayors and local leaders from nearly 50 U.S. cities came together in Rio de Janeiro on the eve of COP30 to say America is all in, through the actions of local mayors, council members, and city staff committed to addressing the impacts of climate change that residents and communities experience every day. And we know that true action, impacts, and solutions to climate crises will be at the local level. So when U.S. cities meet their climate goals, 2/3 of the U.S.'s commitment plan for the Paris Climate Agreement will be met. U.S. local leaders are determined to deliver on climate action that is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of residents and communities, and do it in a way that is affordable, strengthens communities' infrastructure, and grows the economy. As COP30 gets underway, local leaders want negotiators to recognize the role of cities and subnational governments as full partners to bridge the implementation gap, deliver on the Paris Climate Agreement, and secure a just transition. So turning to the specific task of today's panel, we are doing some important work here at the City of Savannah when it comes to nature-based solutions. So this includes investing in green infrastructure to address flooding and stormwater management challenges, critical priorities for our coastal city, such as ours. And these projects are financed through a combination of federal and local funding, including FEMA's Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, or BRIC program, and our Stormwater Utility User Fee, which the funds are specifically used to improve drainage and resilience infrastructure. We are also updating our flood hazard mitigation plan, which helps us maintain our FEMA Community Rating System, or CRS, status. A higher CRS rating means lower flood insurance premiums for our residents, and it encourages ongoing investment in resilience projects. So nature-based solutions can simultaneously reduce greenhouse gas emissions and strengthen local resilience while also providing an array of community co-benefits, including lower energy bills, more green space, connecting children to nature, and equitable quality of life improvements for residents. Nature-based solutions and green infrastructure are also strategies that help local leaders address the intersectional issues of climate change, public health, and inequality. I'd like to provide additional examples from several other U.S. cities. In 2024, the city of Dallas, Texas, adopted a bond resolution to help finance the city's comprehensive environmental and climate action plan, including $1.25 billion for climate action projects such as green infrastructure and green buildings. The city's climate action plan includes 8 goals and 97 climate mitigation, climate adaptation, environmental quality, and environmental justice actions. Another example is Harrisonburg, Virginia, a city with a little over 50,000 residents. The Harrisonburg Conservation Assistance Program supports residents with tree planting, installing pervious pavement, green roofs, and more. And the city provides funding through matching funds with private property owners, who share in the project costs. So nature-based solutions also improve community resilience to extreme weather events such as flooding, drought, extreme heat, and wildfires. This is important because in the wake of recent high-cost natural disasters, a number of insurance companies have been unable to properly cover the losses of their policyholders due to industry being overexposed to loss. That is why it is vital for cities to evaluate their own risk exposure and ensure they are properly insured against natural disasters. Many local governments have found stability and long-term savings by participating in government risk pools, which help spread risk, reduce volatility, and ensure access to affordable coverage, even when private sectors withdraw from high-risk market, private insurers. In the U.S., we have seen insurance companies that have doubled existing premiums, canceled homeowner policies, or stopped offering new policies in some states because of rising costs and losses from extreme weather events such as hurricanes and wildfires. This impacts the ability of residents and local governments to recover and rebuild from disasters and increases insurance costs for residents and businesses. The National League of Cities recently held a roundtable discussion in New York City during Climate Week, and that they brought together local leaders from across the U.S. to discuss nature-based solutions for climate resilience. And one of the challenges discussed was how to better move community members and infrastructure out of harm's way, but with care. Local leaders urged one another to explore alternatives in managed retreat that would enhance the cost-effectiveness of resilience investments while addressing and centering community concerns. When it comes to insurance industry, incentives such as rate adjustments can reward policyholders who take mitigation actions. And another idea is developing an incentive-based disaster insurance and mitigation system that encourages property owners to build new homes outside of high-risk areas and to retrofit existing structures to reduce future losses. We need to enable governments and businesses to obtain the proper coverage necessary for public safety and the delivery of public services to flow the commerce and economic development. Insurers play a critical role in helping communities understand and manage risk and helping communities rebuild when disasters strike to protect residents, infrastructure, and our economy. So thank you for hosting this section, and I look forward to the discussion.
Well, thank you so much for kicking us off with really, really sort of interesting examples that I think we can unpack later. Because it's really important to understand that these things are happening and nature is already playing a huge role, particularly across cities all around the world. And it's obviously very fitting where we are here in Belém. It's fitting to have a Brazilian voice join us. So that's why I am really, really excited that we managed to get Mayor Arnaldo Borgo Filho on the stage. The mayor from the Brazilian city of Vila Velha. I hope I didn't completely mess up the pronunciation. And I have to admit, I'm not quite sure where the city is. So that might be actually a good way of starting us off. So I'm really pleased. I understand you'll say your words in Portuguese and we will have a translation. So thank you so much for joining us, and over to you. Thank you.
Uma boa tarde a todos. A alegria estar aqui com vocês. Ela não conhece, mas está feito o convite para conhecer a melhor cidade do Espírito Santo e uma das melhores cidades do país, do Brasil. Está o convite feito, vai gostar muito, não tenho dúvida disso. Já começo a traduzir.
Hi, good afternoon. This is the mayor of Vila Velha, Arnaldo, and he said he's very happy to be here today, and that she doesn't know where Vila Velha is, but it's one of the best and most beautiful cities in Espírito Santo, and they were really and deeply invited to go to the city.
Quero agradecer desse momento de estar aqui com vocês, dizer dos desafios que a nossa cidade enfrentou, que enfrenta e que com toda certeza enfrentará no futuro, mas com uma grande diferença de estar preparada para tudo que vier, pelas alterações climáticas que vier pela frente.
He's very happy to be here, and he thanks everybody for the invitation. And it's a pleasure. He's going to talk about the challenges that Vila Velha is facing and has faced in the past, and is probably going to face in the future because of the environmental and climate changes. But it's very important to be prepared for everything, so he's going to talk a little about the adaptation.
Há 5 anos atrás, quando eu assumi a cidade, era uma cidade que tinha problemas crônicos com as alterações climáticas, a exemplo dos grandes alagamentos que existiam na minha cidade, que causavam um transtorno muito grande para muitas famílias. 3 vezes ao ano, chovia na nossa cidade e entrava água na casa de mais de 50 mil famílias.
So when he first entered the mayor 4 years ago, now 5, the city suffered from frequent floods, and it was a big problem because 3 or 4 times a year the water would invade the house of the people, and it was like a huge problem.
E que, com muito planejamento, muita organização, está sendo construído por várias mãos o maior investimento em mitigação por conta das mudanças climáticas que nós estamos vivendo. Já foram investidos R$1 bilhão em galerias e estações de bombeamento de águas pluviais, em comportas que evita que a água do mar entre na cidade e bombeia a água da cidade para o mar. Nesse exato momento são 10 estações de bombeamento, de um total de 12, ou seja, mais 2 estão sendo construídas, que até a metade do ano que vem a gente vai estar com ela em operação.
So it's a job, a work that is being done by a lot of hands and with a lot of help. And they have invested 1 million, and they're going to invest in total 1 million on this infrastructure work. And they're going to build a kind of deck that stops the water and stops it from invading the city. They have finished 10 of them, but they are going to build 12 in total. And they are going to be ready until the middle of the next year.
A nossa cidade está preparada, principalmente com uma grande governança, onde todos os secretários que têm autonomia de tomada de decisão entendem e sabem para onde conduzir suas políticas públicas para ajudar a mitigar o problema da mudança climática. O nosso secretário tem uma grande governança, onde todos os secretários são tomadores de...
Okay, so on the city we have a governance that we have a lot of secretaries that work for the mayor that understand a lot about the problem, about the floods and what has to be done to promote mitigation of this problem. So it's a work that is being done together and very cooperative.
Para ser breve, nesse exato momento, a gente está fazendo a implantação de diversas unidades de conservação, fazendo plantios, programa de recuperação de área degradada, de mais de 80 mil árvores nativas nessas unidades de conservação, unidade de conservação da Mantegueira, Morro do Moreno, Penedo, Jacarenema.
These last ones were the names of the conservation units that they are implementing in the city, and
unidade de conservação. Jacarenema, Penedo, Morro da Mantegueira e Morro do Moreno. Já estão sendo implementadas.
They are already being implemented, and they are considered very important for this mitigation process as well.
A nossa cidade está preparada para enfrentar as mudanças climáticas, mas nós sabemos que contra a força da natureza não tem ninguém que consegue estar preparado. Mesmo assim, a gente está lá mitigando os problemas da força da alteração da mudança climática, e a gente acredita muito que a gente ter um seguro para que a gente possa dar a resposta muito rápida, principalmente quando houver algum desastre, alguma catástrofe, é muito importante para que a gente possa reconstruir e principalmente mitigar.
The city is already prepared to face this extreme events that are becoming more frequent with the climate change, where it's impossible to go against the nature and to fight nature. But it's essential to feel secure and be secure to face these problems when they arrive and promote effective and fast answer to the population, and also mitigate the effects that these events are going to have over the city.
Fale com eles que a minha cidade é uma cidade muito grande, tem mais de 520 mil habitantes, e que eu gostaria de passar 2 vídeos mostrando o que é Vila Velha, para que ela e todos possam ter a noção do que nós estamos falando.
The mayor says that he's going to be very brief with his presentation, but Vila Velha is a very big city. It has more than 500,000 people living in there, and it's a very beautiful city. So he would like to present 2 videos in here of the city, if it's possible, so you all get to know how the city is and how beautiful it is.
O vídeo está aqui no WhatsApp, eu posso espelhar, mas eu acho que a equipe lá pode receber, se assim eles puderem fazer.
We have the video here on WhatsApp, so... How long? Quanto tempo tem o vídeo?
2 minutos no máximo.
2 minutes.
No máximo. Ok? Pode compartilhar com vocês.
I don't know if it's possible. Yes?
Let's try and show it at the end of the session, yeah? Okay, so we can, okay, no, that I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I now know where your city is, and we should come and visit you. Thank you so much.
It says you are losing it if you don't go there.
Oh. Okay, okay.
Very fond of the city, as you can see.
Okay, we will try our best to show the video. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, this was a very fitting reminder of why the topic is so important, because obviously we're facing what we often call the twin crisis. We have climate risk increasing and impacting communities. At the same time, we also have nature loss, eroding the natural capacity to absorb a lot of these risks. And I think what we're going to discuss here is really innovative solutions that try and address both, and that can't come more urgent. We know there is a lot of innovation in this space. I often think back to my start working in the insurance sector a long, long time ago, when I was faced with something called the chainsaw massacre accusation, when insurers were accused of telling their policyholders to cut down trees because of the damage to their roofs or subsidence issues and so on. And one insurer was very smart and said, well, we just plant them for them, but somewhere else. And, you know, I think that was a very common sense solution. But that's the kind of mindset. I mean, we need to work with nature. And just because it's green, it's not necessarily always the solution to everything. But there is a lot that we can do to protect our communities, our infrastructure, and our businesses. So with that, I would like to welcome our 3 panelists to the stage here to join me. We're going to talk about innovations in this space, and I will give each of them a chance to outline some of these innovations. I'll do that by starting myself, and I noticed I hadn't even introduced myself to you. So I am Managing Director for Climate Sustainability at Marsh McLennan, one of the sponsors here. And I have the pleasure of working across different geographies, different types of risk holders, so cities, businesses, some cases individuals, often governments, on addressing exactly these questions. And I think what really encourages me is that there's a growing appetite, as we've just heard from the mayors, to actually find smart solutions that can provide co-benefits. And I think this is a really good starting point, to bring up nature-based solutions, because if we do them smartly, they can deliver a lot of co-benefits. But I think what is important is to bring in nature into the way we evaluate risk, we price risk, and we understand risk. And that can be often quite challenging. And I think this is where actually insurance can play a role. And this is where some of the recent innovations that we've seen are quite promising, but that's where also some of the challenges sit. So before we kind of start our discussion, I would give each of you a chance to just introduce yourself, what you're doing, why you're here at COP, and why this topic is very important to you. And while we do that, I would like to ask the colleagues who are now so busy trying to load up the video to show the one slide that we have in the background. Ah, perfect. Because this is something that gives you an immediate impact. It's a survey that we're running, and for each respondent, we're going to plant a tree. So it's a survey about the role of insurance in the nature and climate space. It's only going to take 3 or 4 minutes, and we'll plant a tree. So there you go. So do that, maybe not while the panelists are talking, but keep that in mind. So I would like to start with you, Emily. Just tell us a little bit about what you do and why you, well, maybe say whether you're upbeat on the role of insurance in the nature space, and then we'll go back to our script.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Landis. I am the Global Director of the Adaptation and Resilience work at the Nature Conservancy. And I think the role of insurance is great, and I'm extremely excited to continue to work with the insurance sector. We work closely on things like coral insurance in Mexico. We've also worked very closely with Marsh McLennan on the Global Mangrove Breakthrough, where the role of insurance in unlocking $4 billion in mangrove conservation and restoration. And also the insurance industry has done quite a lot on our resilience credit work, which I think I'll be talking about later. So go insurance.
Okay, there you go. Someone who's optimistic. That's good. Okay, over to you.
Hello, thank you so much for including us. My name's Anuja Jaitley. I'm the head of global partnerships at Blue Marble. Blue Marble is a consortium of leading insurance organizations, including Marsh McLennan in Zurich as part of our consortium. And we together develop parametric or weather-based insurance products specifically for the underserved market. And from our perspective, given that we work in the insurance space, specifically climate insurance, we're seeing many overlaps with really interesting innovations in nature-based solutions and how they both can collaborate with the insurance products we're developing, or we can use insurance products to incentivize those particular activities, both at the sovereign level when we're thinking about national policies, as well as at the more micro level working directly with smallholder farmers, which I can share more about later.
Okay, and last but not least, Rachel.
So I'm Rachel Delez from Convex Insurance. I'm Group Head of Sustainability there. My role covers looking at our sustainability approach through our investments, our underwriting, and operationally. So it's quite a sort of wide role. And why I've come to COP is to engage particularly on the role of insurance in climate resilience and in energy transition. So those are my sort of areas of focus. We also, as I'll come on to talk about, have quite an engagement in the ocean carbon world, and there is some quite good dialogues in that. So I'm trying to raise the role of insurance in all of these conversations because I think, as you've described, it has a huge role to play.
Okay, well, that is very good. And I just realized I have been a very bad host because we also have people joining online, and I should have at least acknowledged that. So there are people online, and I think you're unlucky because you're not going to be able to ask questions, but hopefully you can still hear us. So thank you for our panelists. Emily, let's start with you. And I think, you know, there were some recent exciting announcements about a blue carbon resilient credit project. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more and then sort of bring in the insurance link, if that's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we developed the resilience credit, it was actually in partnership with AXA XL, who was Axel Catlin at the time. And they were saying, we have to offset our carbon emissions. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could offset our carbon emissions while also building out resilience because we're an insurance company? And so that's where that started. And so we talked with Vera and developed a methodology that would do the co-benefits of resilience credits. And so what we've looked at is the assets that are protected because of the existence of mangroves and tidal marshes. Was I ice cream? Yeah, okay. And so what we realized is that it provides a lot of benefits in the range of 15 million to hundreds of millions of dollars with the mangroves and tidal marshes intact. And so as we've continued to look into the carbon market space, what we realized is actually there's a huge opportunity to decouple the resilience credit and use it as an insurance mechanism, use it as an opportunity with the World Bank, with other the Global Climate Facility and the Global Environmental Facility, and just thinking about ways that we can actually use this methodology to apply resiliency. So in the broad sense, it's a really exciting methodology that will be approved by the end of this year. We're looking at implementing the methodology in 3 locations right now. We're working in South Carolina, we're working in the Gulf of Mexico, and then we are also looking at India, where they're doing a carbon offset project and then merging the resilience credit, which will have an additional revenue benefit of $15 million. So it's a really good way to not only do carbon crediting, but also then add in that resilience benefit.
Okay, well, thank you. I think it's really powerful to see that this can work in very different contexts. And that's something maybe we can come back to, because they're often quite exciting pilots and they've been tried and tested. And then the funding stops and, the project dies a sudden death and all you have left is a nice publication.
Yeah.
But I think we are now coming to the stage where that is actually no longer the case, and some of these projects can be scaled up, and some of the solutions that we see, we see this at our end with the resilience bond idea that's been sort of placed in North Carolina, and we're hoping to replicate that in other geographies and have a nature-based element built into that. So hopefully that's what we see. But I want to come to the challenges in a minute, but I like it that you're optimistic, and I like that you have a good project. Blue Marble, you have a very strong focus on agriculture risk. So can you tell us a little bit more about, maybe give some examples of the role that nature plays in that context?
Absolutely, thank you. Maybe I'll draw in an example from one of our projects that we run with Nespresso in Colombia, specifically with smallholder farmers. It's very much a micro example of our intersection of insurance and nature-based solutions. There we see a few ways in which the intersection is occurring. The farmers are naturally engaged in a number of nature-based solution and regenerative agriculture activities, be it agroforestry, beekeeping, or using or developing organic fertilizer. But we're noticing that the insurance, the payouts of the insurance are allowing the investments in those particular activities, and also in situations of low income, ensuring that those farmers continue to engage in those nature-based solutions as opposed to sort of returning back to sort of prior practices that may not have been so sustainable in nature. Another way in which we're seeing it play out at the micro level with smallholder farmers is also thinking through how we can merge the benefits of insurance with regenerative agriculture practices. So, for example, we're exploring, suppose the payout of the insurance wasn't necessarily cash, but was instead inputs for agriculture, in regenerative agriculture inputs such as like fertilizers or things like that. So there are some examples of how we're trying to find connections between those two spaces.
Okay, no, that's very interesting. I think at the moment people hear like coffee, there is a direct connection, and I think there are some powerful examples. Rachel, sort of you're looking at this from a slightly different angle. Like Convex has a very different sort of setup compared to Blue Marble. But, where does this nature fit into your sustainability strategy to begin with?
Yeah, so let me speak about it specifically from sustainability. We're a big commercial insurer. Obviously, this nature comes into what we insure and how we do it in different ways. But as far as we're concerned, it basically is sort of 3 areas. One is through our philanthropic charitable support of initiatives. The second one is through the business that we do, the underwriting and the investments. And thirdly, through our carbon offset program. So the first, we have chosen to support an area of blue carbon science, and it's an area that has received incredibly little attention, which is the carbon stored in the seabed, in the continental shelf seabed, which is there's very little understanding of where the rich carbon deposits are, how they got there, how it's sequestered. So we have joined with Blue Marine Foundation and the University of Exeter, who are leading the science on this. It's a 5-year program. It's currently in its 4th year, looking at all these areas. The ocean has, and the seabed in particular, has 95% of the world's biosphere. It receives 5% of any climate funding. So I think what's important is that as a financial institution, you can make a difference by choosing an area of nature or carbon science to lean into to help leverage the work that a university or a foundation could not do otherwise. So that's one area that we've tackled. On the investment side, we have an impact investment allocation, a fund. We've chosen to invest some of that in an afforestation program that is about getting the return, but also part of the return in time can come through carbon credits. So that's a sort of example of how investments can go in that way. But actually, to your point about blue bonds, etc., our investments, and insurers sit on 40% of the world's assets. Our assets, if it's structured the right way, could be used to invest in nature-based assets. A sort of slightly different example, but an example of how insurers' asset allocation has been identified as has been used. So we've backed something called the Infrastructure Resilience Development Fund. Now this is looking at infrastructure investment in the developing world, and that investment, it can be renewable energy related, it can be but it could be something addressing for example, the mayor was talking about how they've put infrastructure in to mitigate the impact of surge. So it could be nature-based assets. It could certainly go. That structure could be adapted for nature-based asset protection, because how it's structured is that there is a development bank taking the sort of junior side of the investment, so taking more of the risk, and then the insurers are taking the sort of senior debt of this. So it's quite an interesting structure that I think could be interestingly modeled. And then for the third area that I would say is a focus, so we buy carbon offsets for our kind of operational emissions, in most of which are nature-based carbon removal. And if I was just to call out one that I found quite interesting, largely because I was able to go and visit it, it's a regenerative farm in the UK, and just seeing exactly how they have maximised and changed entirely how that farm works through meeting the standards of the particular regenerative farming standard that allows it then to be used as a carbon credit. So I got to go and visit that. It was incredibly insightful and reassuring in terms of because obviously the audit process is one of the areas of concern in carbon offsets, but just how rigorous that is and the difference that it makes. So that's how nature hits our business at the moment.
Okay, well that is very, very, well, 3 very powerful but also very different examples. And I think it's important when we talk about insurance not to forget the investment side. So I think that's, and there is growing recognition, I think growing demand and growing opportunities for investors to invest in nature. If we go back to the insurance examples that we heard earlier, and to the challenges that both mayors were presenting here, something that I notice is often there is a lack of trust or experience in nature-based solutions. And to be fair, we are more used to flat walls. We're more used to the sort of standard engineered approach. So is this something that in your capacity building, in your sort of engagement, that you have to spend a lot of time? Or do you think that's becoming more and more sort of accepted, that understanding of what are actually nature-based solutions, and can we trust them, and don't they take too long time? I mean, forests take a while to grow. So how do we factor that into our understanding within the insurance sector, where we kind of used to look at risk in one way, and nature doesn't always necessarily fit?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and it's something that we've seen in the insurance sector. So when we were first developing our reef insurance in Mexico, one of the biggest issues we had was, well, how much protection is it really providing the hotels behind, the reef? And so we had to get science involved, and we found out that it was reducing wave attenuation by 99%. So you can't lie about these types of figures. So obviously the reef was providing a really important benefit. And once we presented that level of benefit with the actual amount of damage that they would receive, that's when the conversation started. And that's when the hotels came to the table. That's when the government came to the table and said, yes, actually, maybe an insurance product is the right thing to do because it's actually cheaper than doing these, flood walls. It's free, basically. And so when a storm hits, it's a parametric insurance that then triggers the cleanup and restoration of the coral reef. So it's able to do its wave attenuation reduction. And the thing about corals is it's a rock-like structure. So it does restore very quickly. It's not like a tree that has to wait years. It's there and it's providing the protection the minute it's restored. I would say then the second thing that I've been seeing, especially with us developing the resilience credit, is it is a methodology that can be applied anywhere. It's a rigorous scientific methodology that's been approved by insurance companies. It's been modeled by really prestigious scientists. And the thing is, anybody can use this methodology. So in theory, any insurance company could take the resilience credit methodology and see how it compares to built infrastructure. And so then the idea is that it is to trigger, wow, actually, if we used our natural assets and blended it with our built infrastructure, we could actually save a lot of money. And so that's the point of this, is really talking about the money saved through natural assets. And so I think those are two really compelling ways that we're seeing that conversation start. And then the last I would say is carbon markets themselves. Carbon markets are extremely risky for nature-based solutions. There's a lot of issues which get negotiated here on Article 6, and how do you actually implement Article 6? And do governments own, especially coastal wetlands, or are they owned by communities? And so there is political risk. And actually, we've created something called political risk insurance. And so we've actually put political risk insurance on carbon market projects so they're able to generate a return. So if you put in upfront investment, you can still get your money back if there's any type of issue around Article 6 in the future. So we are seeing insurance playing a role coming to the table when you start talking about money and you start actually showing that this natural infrastructure is providing a benefit, whether it's carbon or protection.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite striking. I think all of you referenced the need to also collaborate with science and get the science and the understanding integrated into our insurance or investment decisions. And I think what you were describing there, I think that's been, in my experience, I also work at the London School of Economics, and it's a really important area where you bring the evidence, the understanding, and build the trust also into the tools. And when I work with colleagues at Guy Carpenter, part of Marsh McLennan, it's really powerful when you visualize these risk reduction benefits. So you have kind of a very nice way of showing what a difference mangroves make when there's a flood. I mean, this is massive, and in some areas it can reduce to 75%. Maybe not the 99%, but 75%. Even with wildfires, I mean, often nature gets very bad press when you talk about wildfires, but there are nature-based solutions, and working smartly with nature can make dramatic differences to the communities. And I think visualizing that and showing that is the first step. And what we've heard from the representatives of cities, I think this is starting to sink in because it provides co-benefits as well. And Anuja, looking at you, this idea there are benefits. There's like a resilience dividend. There is something to be gained from that. That is nice. We can prove it. We can show it. But how can we integrate that into the decisions that you as an insurer are having to make?
Oh, thank you. It's a really good question around how can we have these sorts of solutions impact the pricing or modeling of these designs. I would say from a design perspective, if you're working with a sovereign or large-scale project or a small micro project around that has a nature-based solution in place, it allows us to model in a way that it's much more catastrophic in nature. That in turn certainly reduces the pricing because there are certain types of risks, certain types of rainfall or wind patterns that wouldn't necessarily damage that infrastructure or land in the way that it would have traditionally without that nature-based solution in place. So it does change the way we could model in a way to bring down price, but also make the product make much more sense given this improved context. I would say outside of that, though, another place where we're seeing potential growth, and these are all places where we hope to see much more impact and growth around pricing, is to think through how having insurance can either reduce the lending rates associated with these projects for small-scale farmers. There are loans that need to be taken out in order to make these investments. So if you have insurance and de-risk the land as well as the activities that you intend to make investments around, that makes that loan potentially much more risky and therefore much more acceptable to a lender, whoever that might be. But we're also seeing at a higher level in sort of large-scale projects, many of which you're looking at, large deforestation projects or coastal restoration projects that are looking for large-scale investment, needing insurance up front in order to make those investors much more willing to invest in the first place, and therefore have the opportunity to scale those projects much more quickly. So I think there's lots of scope around pricing and impact on the financial side of all the insurance products associated with nature-based solutions, but it's very much a growth area. I think there's lots of room for opportunity, though.
Okay, well, Rachel, what is your take on this? Because my reflection is that I think insurers and the sector in general are still struggling, despite these good examples, but are still struggling to really sort of quantify and rewarding also the resilience benefits. And so what is your take, and how can we sort of overcome that?
I think that's right. I think we part of it might be down to ownership, who owns whatever it is, right? So, but I think there is still, because there is, I go to a lot of events where there's increasing focus on nature-based assets, and there's sort of will to, and not least through regulation, that's putting some importance on people demonstrating how they're addressing nature-based risk. But I think back to the point about data, I think that can help unlock it. I think one of the features that I was going to address was, we are a member of something called the Insurance Development Forum, and the Insurance Development Forum is all about expanding the footprint of insurance in the emerging world, essentially, and addressing the protection gap. But what that needs is risk modeling, and there is a risk modeling steering group that we back, that I co-chair, and the risk modeling steering group has developed models. So it does two things. It's developed tools for markets, jurisdictions, geographies where there is no modeling. So the emerging world, and it's created a joint venture with something called the Global Risk Modeling Alliance, which is backed by and is for the purposes of the V20. There's a vulnerable. It's actually more like the V40, the vulnerable 40 countries, and that's who it's aiming to address. So they don't have, if you don't have much in the way of modeling or data infrastructure behind that, this is what it's trying to do. And I think what then can happen is, if you want to bring in additional markets, if you have the data that lends itself, for example, to parametric triggers that can trigger against a nature-based asset or an owned asset, an owned property, that then helps. The insurance, the ILS, the cat bond market massively expanded because of in areas and modeled areas where there is where we could put a number at it, where we could quantify and say the risk of that event potentially happening is X, and the reason why they can see that risk is because they have the data underpinning it. So to summarize, I think you have to expand the data that's going to be able to allow you to come up with these tools and these solutions, and that takes a lot of. And that isn't necessarily there at the moment. So you have to make an effort, because the dollar money in the insurance world is all in OECD. So you've got to sort of roll your sleeves up and try and help make it happen elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite interesting, this idea of using the data, and I think we're accelerating a lot. Technology will help us. I mean, I think there's often this assumption that as an insurer, you press a button and you have it all in front of you, and you can tell exactly, what influences the risk, how the risk is shaped. Insurance industry has a really good risk understanding. It's improving all the time. But in areas such as this, there's also a steep learning curve. And I think, technologies, but at the same time, these projects and these innovations and the collaboration with scientists have brought us a long way. I mentioned the chainsaw massacre story at the beginning. I've come a long way. I'm now tasked with compiling a big compendium of solutions where nature and insurance are sort of, well, kind of interlinked, that could be solutions, as we were discussing, where nature-based solutions are kind of recognized as risk reduction effort. It could be environmental liability insurance innovations where biodiversity issues are recognized, or it could be in the context of carbon markets. And I haven't even started doing that, but I've already been inundated by examples, and people have been telling me about the number of cases that are out there. So that is very encouraging. But I think hopefully these are not just pilots, but something that we can scale and that we can also bring into different communities. As we've heard, maybe Savannah, maybe here in Brazil across several cities. I said initially I would give you a chance to ask questions. If you're online, you're not going to have that chance. But if you're in the room, now is your moment. And while I'm looking at questions, I have a question whether we have the video available. We don't have the video available. Okay. So I think I can encourage you to go and Google the name of the city. It's the capital of, if I remember this correctly, well, the city is Vila Velha. Any Brazilian here who can tell me it's the capital of? Espírito Santo. Okay, there you go. So Google that, not now, afterwards. And also remember our survey and the tree planting. So I've given you enough time to think about a question. Anybody wants to ask a question? I'll come to you. Remember the instruction of how to hold the microphone.
Thanks a lot. Guillaume Lorenz from Sustainable Finance Observatory in France. Fantastic. Thank you for really what you offered for the sharing experience. Got a question regarding the constraints linked to the ticket size. So do you face it, and do you have any recommendation to go beyond?
Thank you.
I think that's the whole problem, is the scaling of any of this. You know, some of these solutions that one reads about, nature-based with insurance behind it, sometimes it's a foundation paying the premium or something, and the ticket sizes are small, right? So to get, and actually, that reminds me, somebody said to me recently, if we just change the word nature for infrastructure, that would change the way we approach it. So why are we talking about nature-based assets? These are infrastructure. It is infrastructure protecting the reef that's in front, that's preventing storm surge, destroying the beach of the Marriott Hotel and wherever. So we have to change the language with which we use what this is, and then I do think we need public markets to come in and take some of the risk, and then because there's an appetite in the capital markets for the private markets for this risk. It's just got to be structured in the way that they can that the risk meets their appetite. But I think the ticket size basically is not there currently, and that's why we've got to address what it's going to need. But I think we should be ambitious in what we do.
And I would just agree that one of the things, and I'm going to pivot to carbon markets, which when you say like nature-based solutions, they say, oh, $20 a ton. And it's like, wait a second, you're willing to do some of these like direct carbon capture at $1,000, $2,000 a ton, and there's no co-benefits. Versus you're doing nature-based solutions, there are co-benefits. And so I do think, completely agree, we need to start using different words, because I don't think it's quite resonating that nature-based solutions is actually more effective in many cases than some of this built infrastructure or technology or AI like technology as well. And so we just need to really think about the co-benefits and how we sell this, that actually you're doing a lot all at the same time.
I would think often pooling projects is also quite an interesting one. And I think there are some potential to learn from these pilots to get the trust and then pool them together. I think that I've been seeing that across many regions. We have time for one more question. There was one in the back. Okay.
Thank you all so much. This has been really interesting. My question was, so I've been hearing a lot that, we're not there yet in quantifying the benefits of nature. So I was wondering if you could just be a little more specific as to why we're not there yet and what needs to happen to get us there. So that could be on the insurer side, on, nature organizations like the Nature Conservancy, university side, like what are the next steps?
Very good question. Who wants to go first?
I can say, we have done a lot to quantify nature-based solutions. We've done a lot to say what the value is. I think there's two issues, at least from the nonprofit and the academia sector. Love academics, but sometimes they cannot just give you a number. They have to give you percentage of risk and all these caveats. And I have sat down with scientists before and said, this is great, but I can't sell this to anybody if I include 20 caveats and all this other stuff. I'm like, investors do not do this. Investors oversell. Like, we are just selling right on the mark. We need to be confident in our numbers and just move forward with what we're saying. So I would say one is sometimes we just need to be bold like investors, and we're not always like that because we don't want to be. We're science-based. We want to make sure that everything is clear, and I think we do that to our detriment. And then the second is sometimes we're just using the wrong metrics. And so we've found that a lot at the Nature Conservancy when we're working with companies. We'll give them this big map with all this data and these spreadsheets, and they're like, we just wanted one number. Why you didn't need to give us all of this? What's the one number? And so I think that's another issue is the data's there, but we're just not articulating it with that one number that they needed. So my view is a lot of it's already out there. It's just finding it and communicating it correctly in a way that insurers and other businesses can actually make decisions.
Anuja, you want to?
Sure, I'll just add a little bit. I completely agree with everything she's sharing around simplicity. But I think one of the other things that we see quite a bit in terms of nature-based solutions is that they're usually part of a suite of adaptation things that we're doing in any particular location. And that's a good thing. We're thinking about resilience and adaptation in a large sense, but it creates a struggle around creating a causation, being able to prove causation specifically for one activity, whether it's ideas around living income, whether it's ideas around nature-based solutions and other sort of adaptation activities. And so in some ways, changing the narrative to be so specific to one specific activity, but seeing them as a suite of activities and selling them as a collective makes that sort of data and selling aspect maybe simpler. Not necessarily simpler, but more achievable, I'll say.
I mean, I agree, but I also have to sort of step in and defend. I think nature is complex, and we need to be very careful that in this space, we're not doing shortcuts that then have unintended consequences. And it is quite nice to just jump onto everything that is green. And, there have been the wrong things have been planted. And, I mean, we just need also the science and the understanding. But I completely agree that we need to find some common ground to move this forward. And that's why I found it really encouraging to hear how you're doing this in your day jobs. And I can give you now a very big reward. You're going to now watch the little video that the mayor promised us. Oh, there you go. Wow.
Viagem de fugir com você. Vivo preparando uma viagem para desaparecer. Sigo viajando na viagem sem sair do lugar. Ando viajando na viagem de viver pra te amar. Viajando na viagem de fugir com você. Vivo preparando uma viagem pra desaparecer. Sigo viajando na viagem sem sair do lugar. Ando viajando na viagem de viver pra te amar.
Really appreciate it. So with that, let's go.